Is Atlantis in Manisa? British archaeologist Peter James, the author of the book, The Sunken City, came to Manisa for the second time and worked with the BBC film crew next to him. James's team included Greek archaeologist Nikos Kokkinos from the University of London. The BBC made a documentary TV movie. The film was shot on the thesis of Peter James, and according to James's approach, the Lost Continent Atlantis was located on Mount Sipil in Manisa. James argues that the mythological Lydian king Tantalus, who is assumed to have lived in the Manisa region, is the same person as Atlas, the father of Atlantis, and that Tantalus, the country of Tantalos, must be Atlantis, citing mythological and archaeological sources. This is a claim, but it is a claim on a scientific line because this time, there are people from the scientific world, not fanatical believers. Are these enough? While reading Peter James's theses, it is not necessarily seen that Atlantis should be in Manisa, as in many parts of the world, the priority and importance that a legend can be carried in our country is, and we follow Peter James from his own line. Where is Atlas serving his penalty? Plato says that the first king of Atlantis was the son of Poseidon. According to Greek myths, Poseidon is the father of giants, namely the Titans, and the one-eyed giant Cyclops, killed by Odysseus, complains to his father. But the fact that the god of the seas is the father of the giant Atlas is not emphasized much in mythology, rather the bards say that Atlas is one of the Titans. Atlas is the second major character of the Titans, that is, he is the son of Kronos and the brother of Iapetus. Atlas' best-known brother is the Titan Prometheus, the Titan who stole fire from the skies and secretly gave it to the human race. According to the myths, Prometheus is the character who created man from clay. But he is caught and punished by Zeus. Because of all these events, there is no temple built in the name of Prometheus in ancient Greece because Zeus' anger was feared. In other words, Prometheus and his brother Epimetheus are against the Olympians. The other two brothers, Menoetius and Atlas, take part in the great Titans' war against Zeus. Menoetius is struck by a lightning bolt by Zeus during the war, and Atlas is taken prisoner and sentenced to a special punishment. He will carry the heavens on his back for eternity. The issue of where Atlas took his punishment is controversial. Hesiod mentions Tartaros, that is, underground, and according to some, Atlas is serving his punishment in Hyperborea, the land of the north winds. Homer, on the other hand, refers to the west, namely the Atlantic Ocean. The first place that draws attention here is the Atlas Mountains in Morocco because, according to the myth of Perseus, Atlas turned into a mountain. The Roman geographer Pomponius Mela writes that the Atlas Mountains are pillars holding up the heavens. Was it given the name because of the unfortunate Titan? Blessed Island in western Anatolia. Another interesting aspect is that the mountains, which were named Atlas, supported by Herodotus, were known by the Libyan tribes as Atarants, or Atlantes, and these names mean, pillar of the heavens. Most likely, the name, Adrur, given by the Berbers was taken from the Greeks who came to the region. So the Atlas Mountains were associated with Atlas. If Plato integrated Atlas with the Lost Kingdom from this point of view, this would not necessarily mean that Atlantis was in the Atlantic Ocean. Because the logic of myths is original and cannot be integrated with worldly logic. The Sicilian poet Pindar says that Atlas was punished not in the west but in the east. Then we must look to the east as well as to the west. The name Atlantis, given by the Lesbos historian Hellanicus, 500 BC, creates a surprising effect. Because Hellanicus lived before Plato and mentions Atlantis as Atlas' daughter. Atlas and his brothers live on an island at the edge of the world called Blessed Island. Blessed Island. This approach is the same as Plato's. Blessed Island is the island of the mythological king of Crete, Rhadamanthus, and his kingdom includes the Aegean Islands and all the western Anatolian coasts. The historian Diodorus, on the other hand, writes that the Blessed Island is related to the flood, and the Eastern Greeks he refers to are those living on the western Anatolian coasts. When the flood started, Lycus, the son of Poseidon, the hero of Hellenicus, escaped to the main continent by sea to escape and learns that it is Lydia. In summary, if a few more sources are considered, it is understood that the Blessed Island is located in the west of the Anatolian coast, and all mythological sources direct Atlas and his family to Asia Minor, and the most striking myth reference is that Iapetus is the ancestor of Cilicia in western Anatolia. Is that two cities were founded here in the name of Atlas' sister Anchiale, and that the name of Iapetus's wife, Atlas' mother, was Ossia. Indeed, the original name of Lydia on the western Aegean coast was Ossia. The name was changed to Anatolia during the Roman period, from which the expression, Asia Minor, originated, and according to Pindar, it means, land of the ancestors. So the search for Atlas can be made in western Anatolia, because this region is of great importance in all myths and beliefs, and more importantly, the ancient societies of Anatolia are generally accepted as our ancestors. Partnership of myths. The war between the Titans and the Olympians, which was the starting point, is similar to the Hittite sources. Mythologist Joseph Fontenrose says that the genetic relationship between Greek and Asian myths should not be overlooked. In the Hittite version, as in Hesiod, the powers ruling the universe are the first Aulus, but he is deposed by Anus and exiled to the dark world. But 9 years later he is fired like a bird by the rebellious cunning Kumarbi and flees and hides in the sky. But then Anus rebels again, and with the help of his brothers, he beats Kumarbi. The relation of this myth with the Greek myths begins with Aulus. He is chaos. Anus is in the same role as Uranus. Kumarbi is close to the rebellious god Kronos, and Teshep, the Hittite god of storms, who was born from him, is very close to Zeus. God Anus, BC, the Sumerian sky god in 3000 BC, is Anu, and from there it was reflected in the Hittites. As with other god transfers, all these mythological sources are generally of Indo-European origin, that is, the inspiration for ancient Greek mythology is Anatolia. There is also an Atlas character in Hittite myths. While Kumarbi creates new gods, he creates a superhuman named Ulakumes. It makes it out of the hardest rock, but Ulakumes grows very fast and will cover everything. Then Kumarbi takes him and puts him on the shoulder of Eubelirus, who carries the heavens and the earth. Eubelirus is a giant, that is, Titan, in short, the Hittite version of Atlas. In Hittite inscriptions and rock paintings in Yazilikia, there are bull-headed half-human creatures carrying the heavens and the earth, and their names are Atlantes. The most interesting connotation here is that the bull is defined as a sacred animal in Plato's Atlantis story, and the cult of the bull is emphasized. Another connotation, on the other hand, another belief that recognizes the sanctity of the bull, namely Mithraism, is of Anatolian origin. Thus, it is seen that Atlas is a common character in both Greek and Hittite myths. Moreover, the Atlas icon is even older. There is a similar personality in pre-Hittite Hurrian beliefs. Was the straight Canacale meant by Plato? Another controversial clue to the presence of Atlantis in Anatolia is Bernard Zonger, the author of the book, The Flood from Heaven, who believes that some Greeks went to Say in Egypt after the Trojan War. The priests of Say know about the Mycenaeans and the Trojan civilization. Troy was an energetic, healthy, strong and famous city at that time, just like the royal city Atlantis described. What is meant is Troy is a very old city in the Dardanelles Strait, where Troy is located, was known as the Pillars of Hercules in ancient times, as was the Strait of Gibraltar. According to Zonger, the location of Atlantis is near Troy. As a result, Zonger's approach is a thesis, but in general, it gave a direction to Atlantis studies towards Anatolia. While chasing the traces of Atlantis in Anatolia, the trace to be sought is the flood in Anatolia. Homer and Hesiod are ancient myth writers, and we may turn to a more robust source, Strabo, the Greek geographer of the 1st century AD. Strabo, BC. He mentions a source who lived in the 4th century. Damocles writes that there were great earthquakes in Lydia and Ionia, as in northern Troy. Hundreds of villages were swallowed by the earth, but Mount Sipil, the land of Tantalus, was shattered, lakes turned into swamps, and Troy was submerged by the waves. When Greek historians and chronographs talk about prehistory, they always talk about Troy. But if Damocles speaks of the flooding of Troy during the Tantalus period, this contradicts the sources in question, because the natural disasters in question took place long before the Trojan War. But the key personality of this article is Tantalus. Tantalus' punishment. Who was Tantalus? First of all, he is one of the active figures of Greek myths. The origin of his name has two meanings. One is a pair of jugs with two separate drinks in it, the other means disappointment. According to Tantalus Homer, Odyssey 11, he is a punished person, and the poet writes, "I saw Tantalus on the way to Pytho. He was standing in a lake while he was suffering terrible tortures. The water was coming up to his chin, but when he wanted to drink, he couldn't take a drop. The old man was bending down. The water was being drawn and the water was being drawn. That hour was a god. The lake was drying up. The berries hung above his head, from the gnarled trees, pears, pomegranates, sparkling apples, and figs with honey hung down. But when the old man stretched out his hands to pluck them, a wind came and threw them into the dark clouds." What was the reason for this punishment? Different crimes are mentioned in various legends. He is one of the divine ancestors in the kings of Lydia in the western Aegean. According to the myth, he took part in the theft of the golden dog that protected Zeus when he was a baby, but his biggest crime is related to the dinner table of the gods. Tantalus is invited to Olympos to eat nectar and drink ambrosia at the table of the gods, but when he returns he steals some of the sacred food to share with his mortal friends. Another accusation story is at the table of the gods, but this time the table is on Mount Sipil. Tantalos sacrifices his son Pelops to please Zeus and cooks his meat and feeds it to the gods, but when the matter is settled, Zeus is disgusted and strikes Tantalus with his lightning, and Pelops again brings it back to life. In both versions, the wishes of the gods are the main idea, that is, the gods are disrespected. Plato writes that the Atlantean kings were also punished for displeasing the gods. Niobe boasting with Atlantean blood as in Atlas, the punishments of the gods are the main idea of all myths. According to all mythological sources, Tantalus is from the race of the Titans and is a relative of Atlas. Historian Carl Carani mentions that the king of Lydia, a descendant of Titan Atlas, is included in the mythological genealogy. He writes how the arrogant daughter of the Roman poet Avidius Tantalus, Niobe, boasted of Atlantean blood. "I am the daughter of Tantalus. She was the only mortal who attended the table of the gods. My mother was the sister of Pleiades and Atlas, and my grandfather Atlas carried the belt of heaven on his shoulders." While a group of experts, including the mythologist Bernard Sargent, emphasizes the closeness of the Atlantides and the Tantalids, they first draw attention to the similarity of Atlas and Tantalus in terms of their mythological destinies. When all these and many other sources are integrated, it can be concluded that the Greek version of Tantalus is Atlas. He may have heard the story from Croesus, king of Lydia, whom Plato cites as a source, and whom Solon knew personally. Both myths have the same themes in both the Tantalus myth and the Atlantis myth. Legendary wealth, proximity to the gods, the fall, earthquakes, floods and volcanoes are almost the same in both myths. Tantalus confusion. Now we turn to another important resource. This source describes the Tantalus period. The source is Pausanias, who lived in Rome during the reign of Emperor Hadrian. The author has apparently seen Manisa and calls this trip homecoming in his guidebook. Pausanias is an earthquake chronologist, BC. He writes that he was researching earthquakes after the earthquake he experienced himself in Achaia in 373 BC. After describing the characteristics of earthquakes at length, Pausanias writes, "The city on Mount Sipil disappeared into the rift. Then water gushed out of the rift and the resulting lake was named Lake Salo." The remains of the city are still at the bottom of the lake and can be seen. The author does not tell us the name of the city, but the Roman encyclopedia writer Pliny writes that the ancient capital of Maeonia was found under the marshes in the Magnesia, Manisa region, and the city was swallowed by the earth as a result of the earthquake. Again, according to Pliny, the same place, Sipil, is the place where the famous blessed city called Tantalus is located. The mythographer Pherecydes, who lived in the 5th century, mentions that the Tantalus kingdom on Mount Sipil was destroyed by an earthquake. Here, too, the Atlas, Tantalus similarity appears as Atlantis, Tantalus, and the results are the same: earthquake and flood. According to Peter James, the Tantalus story may be the lost source behind Plato's Atlantis. In pursuit of Tantalus, when explorer-traveler Charles Texier came to Izmir in 1834 and saw the mound on the hill behind Bayrakli, he defined it as Tantalos' tomb. He proceeded from the writings and description of Pausanias. There was not much evidence of the tomb, other than that it was Mycenaean, and it still remains the same. According to modern researchers, the tomb belongs to one of the local rulers who lived during the Persian period. The same kind of discussions were made about the ruins of old Izmir on the skirts of Yamanlar mountain. Discussions lasted until 1945. Archaeologist Bean, who excavated together with Izmir Museum director Rustam Duyuran, determined that the remains of a mother goddess temple, which was later turned into a water cistern, were found here. In short, there was no trace of a direct relation with Tantalus in the ancient Izmir researches. It was necessary to move a little further west, towards ancient Magnesia, that is, Manisa. There are many clues that Pausanias described in Manisa because Sipil is there, the throne of Pelops, the tomb of Tantalos, Lake Silo are there. There is also a Hittite-style statue of the mother goddess Cybele there. Pausanias writes that there are many statues of the mother of the gods to the north of Mount Sipil and that they were made by Broteas, the son of Tantalus, according to Magnesia. A second reference is that the throne of Pelops, son of Tantalus, is located on a hill in Sipil. Pausanias says these and states that there is now a temple there. In 1887, indeed, a temple was found on the hill on the outskirts of Sipil, and there were traces of belief in a mother goddess. Faint traces of the past, all these traces can be reproduced. Peter James examines Niobe rock and Suluklugel behind Yarikaya as the lake of Tantalus. Compiling all the findings, he writes: 1. It must be a lake or swamp. Silo. 2. There must be a plain on the northern shore of Sipil mountain. 3. The supposed burial of Tantalus should not be far away. 4. There must be water sources near Yaramkaya. 5. Broteas, son of Tantalus Cybele, which was built by, should be nearby. 6. Pelops' throne should be in a bird. Are they all in place? Yes. As Peter James integrates the findings, he compiles all the clues according to Pausanias and explains the results of his own investigation. But the tidal waves that shook the region for ages, almost reversing, created such changes that everything disappeared. Just as Plato described the destruction of Atlantis, historian Tacitus suffered great damage in Sipil and Magnesia, where in 17 AD all Lydia was shaken and 20 famous cities, especially Sard, were destroyed. This means that very few traces can be left behind. Atlantis and Mystery Tourism is the thesis of Peter James and those who support his view convincing enough. Is the evidence strong and incontrovertible? Neither can one say yes or no to these two important questions because, after all, there is no conclusive evidence pointing to Atlantis. James's thesis is the first stage, that is, to add a new one to the theses that Atlantis is in the Bahamas, the South China Sea, the Black Sea, Mesopotamia or the Aegean. Now there is the Manisa, Magnesia thesis, just like the Santorini, Thera thesis. The most important thing is that we can understand the seriousness of an event in terms of tourism, which a group of serious Western scientists and the BBC, one of the most important broadcasting organizations in the world, are interested in. While we attract big tourists with a Stonehenge in England, we can't get half of it with Nemru and Dedum Temple, which is just as striking. While Egypt gathers millions to its country with the pyramids, one of the 7 wonders of the world, we are not even able to reconstruct the Temple of Artemis and the Bodrum Mausoleum, the other 2 of the 7 wonders. We have no bureaucratic or media-related interest in Western scientists and the BBC team who can promote it. Our minds are full of nonsense such as our opinion, scandal, dishonesty, unconscious seriousness, and worst of all, what to believe and not believe. However, if we are really sitting on Atlantis, we should not forget that the lands we own are much more important, and we, as a very young republic, have not done anything yet compared to the giant civilizations that existed thousands of years ago.